Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called The Tyrant Wants to Be Good. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! With the power borrowed from the Spirit of Light, the sun was brought up, and Friday, the Spirit Conjurer, summoned the night through the Spirit of Darkness. Once Millionaire gives vitality to life, Friday would present the gift of rest, and as Millionaire shines warm light on the world, Friday would offer shade to rest from the light and heat. And that's how the world, the Uvera Empire, was created in their hands. With the sole power to summon the spirits with majesty and splendor, the imperial family of Millionaire and the family of Archduke Friday are irreplaceable and unique. But to Dorothea Millionaire, princess of the Uvera Empire who's reading the story, it's just so ridiculous. Suddenly, she moves away upon hearing her older brother, Raymond Millionaire, the crown prince of the Uvera Empire, approaching her. Though Raymond is just as cute and cheerful as he is, Dorothea still thinks that he has no sense of dignity. She suddenly feels teary-eyed when she remembers how she killed him. That's right, the present she's living in now is her second chance in life and also the last opportunity given to her as the tyrant. She swears not to make the same mistake twice. She constantly reminds herself to just be good. In her past life, after killing Raymond and usurping the throne, she became the Emperor of Uvera, eliminating those who stood in her way and sharing wealth and power with those she favored. However, it ended in destruction. The man she loved hated her and chose death. Those people whom she shared her power with used that power to strangle her. The people pointed their fingers at her, calling her a tyrant, and their anger set her palace on fire and beckoned her death. And thus, she accepted her fate. However, she was granted a new life, a chance to turn her life stained with evil and regrets. So in this life, she must not kill him again. And with that, of course, she must not hate him, but given Ray's personality, maybe she should just unalive him. Kidding. Our princess just hates clingy and noisy people. No need to draw a sword here, princess. But to be honest, she never liked Ray. He's got nothing in his pretty little head, yet he has more than she'll ever have just because he's a crown prince. Still, Ray insists on playing outside, but she'd rather read history books than spend her time elsewhere. When the governess notices that Dorothy's reading the Stone of the Spirit of Light and is being corrected, she realizes that Dorothy is indeed a genius. Oops, maybe she should have pretended to know a little less. Then, the governess thinks that the Emperor, Karnon Millionaire, should hear about this, but Dorothy clenches her fist, telling her not to. The word father always feels like a very foreign word that she can only guess the loose translation of, but never really understands what it means. Although they are blood, this bears no significance on her, for she did not inherit the qualification of a millionaire. Her mother, Empress Alice, passed away during childbirth, and Karnon always kept his distance from her. She used to try so hard to catch his attention, striving to be better than Ray. However, he would never give her a second chance, but with Ray, things were different. Without having to do anything at all, Ray received gifts from Karnon and even shared meals together. She started to question why Ray received so much love, who just messed around despite his position as the crown prince. This is what happens when you neglect your children, folks. They may turn into a tyrant. Is that all to that? Or is it because she's not the chosen one? And so, she took every opportunity to be cruel to Ray, but only worsened her relationship with Karnon. She has always longed and craved for love, but her life was too odious for that. Her love was always one-sided and unrequited. And so, the seed of evil grew rapidly in the fertile soil of her anger and resentment, to which eventually gave birth to the envious and jealous, soul-trampling evil that greedily devours others. In the present, Dorothy realizes that even passing off her sins to others is meaningless, blaming herself for not being lovable enough. But that's all right. She can't care more about her father, and it would be better to live without seeing a single shadow. She just has to be good in this life. A day later, the governess points to Alice's home, the garden that Karnon made for her when she was homesick, thinking that it might change Dorothy's mood. However, Dorothy is startled when the governess greets the Emperor. Upon seeing her father's frown, she gulps, thinking what to say. Just then, Karnon coldly asks her who she is to dare enter Alice's garden. Sir, that's obviously your daughter who takes after your tyrannical side. The governess introduces Dorothy, but Karnon thinks that she has no manners for not greeting him. Of course, the governess comes to the rescue, saying that she is very clever and precocious, and that at her age, she's able to memorize the entire genealogy of the Millionaire family. Karnan tests if it's true, but Dorothy will not recite it if it won't benefit her, so as not to waste his valuable time. After all, he hasn't spared a moment to see her since birth. Burn? Take that, Mr. Emperor of child negligence. Shockingly, Karnan agrees to give her whatever she wants. Despite not wanting anything from him at this point, she can't refuse to answer the Emperor. And so, Dorothy likes to have the finest wine made in her name, something that will be useful in the future. Karnan, on the other hand, is startled by how she knows about wine just by reading a difficult book such as the Portrait of Babalua. Karnan agrees to it, but one name wrong would mean a punishment to her governess for lying to the Emperor about Dorothy's strength. Like father, like daughter, huh? Since she has decided to be good in this life, she should at least save the governess. The next day, Dorothy's glad not to see Karnan because he will only ruin her mood. She must avoid all things that detract from her resolution to be good. Only now did she realize that being good is doing basically nothing at all. We'll have to review that, princess, but for now, let's focus on not doing any harm to others, especially to Ray. Speaking of, Ray calls for her name, so she rushes to hide, instructing her governess not to tell Ray where she is. Ray is kinda down because he wants to show her how to wield the Spirit of Light. Wielding the Spirit of Light is said to be a unique blessing for the Millionaires, but that's a very distant story. Millionaire's power, which was said to have made the sun rise, has become desperately weak, and it now has reached a point of only being able to light small fires. And over time, millionaires have been born unable to wield spirits at all. Millionaires like Dorothy. And so, this gave people more reason not to love her, including Karnan. In her defiance against God, she burned with even more fervor in her jealousy of Ray. Due to her bitterness, she used her sword to take the power from the spirit. From the throne, she declared the end of the age of mythology and the beginning of the age of humanity with a bloody sword in her hand. But she failed and was executed a few years later for tyranny. Her humble downfall must have been a punishment from the great legend for her arrogance. Back in the present, Ray is saddened since he also wants to introduce his friend to her. Dorothy turns around the pathway, but she bumps into someone, causing her to fall. When she looks up, she sees the face of a child, the man she loved the most in her former life and the man who loathed her the most. How could she ever forget her love, her breath, her eternity? Theon. Theon is so sorry for ruining her dress and making her cry, but she isn't crying because of it, but rather she misses him a lot. Theon is surprised at how she managed to know his name, but he just wipes her tears with great care. Dorothy can't believe how Theon, who resented her so much, is very much alive, standing in front of her and more radiant than ever. Oh, it must be difficult for her to see the love of her life without remembering what happened before. Theon smiles, calling her a good girl after she calms down a bit. Dorothy thinks that perhaps he is the reason for her return to this life. Suddenly, Ray appears and grabs Theon's collar for hurting Dorothy. But Dorothy manages to get in between and lies about hurting her eyes with some dust. Theon, on the other hand, is surprised at how a princess covered up his insolence. He's even more surprised to see her reaction as if they've already met a long time ago. Ray apologizes to Theon and introduces him as his new friend, Theon Friday. Theon then kisses her hand as a greeting. Oh, our little princess is blushing. Dorothy thinks that it's their new beginning, and so she starts to ask herself, if she could renounce her cruel demands for love and let go of the tragedies of the past, and if she could love him for his sake, could he spare a glance for her in this life? However, she forgets one more thing. Someone calls out Theon's name from behind. Julia Delavigne, Theon's first and last love. Oh no, things just got complicated. Theon, who had no choice but to marry her due to her persistence and the oath between their families, was in love with Julia until his last breath. Having a long-standing friendship as childhood friends, their relationship was special, and the two of them fit together like puzzle pieces. Clearly, there was no room for Dorothy. She craved Karnan's love to no avail and also sought after Theon's love, which was also futile. Theon kept pursuing Julia even after their marriage by exchanging dozens of secret letters. Dorothy could still remember how he smiled whenever he wrote letters to Julia, a countenance he never reserved for her. And to wipe that beaming smile of his, she ordered someone to fabricate a very plausible charge to lead Julia to her death. Of course, she was overjoyed and deluded that Theon would finally be hers. but he chose death over her embrace, leaving her for Julia once again. In the end, it was her selfish love that drove him to death. But could someone call it love when she felt this unbearable heart-splintering ache over and over? Her life was really filled with suffering, wasn't it? And in return, she made the lives of people around her miserable too. Ugh, I hope it'll be different this time around. Even in her second life, Theon and Julia are inseparable. Embarrassed by what her face looks like after seeing them, she excuses herself. She should have known that there's no room for her there. That night, she still clings to Theon's handkerchief, which was given to her when she started crying earlier, in her sleep as her tears roll down. A few days later, Ray is pacing back and forth, extremely nervous that he's becoming the official crown prince at this very day. Even Dorothy can't believe this dewy-eyed brother is to lead the Empire. Good grief. However, she flinches when he tells her that she is the rightful heir to the throne, but she can't since she isn't able to wield the spirits. Thinking about how simple-minded Ray is, his unwitting naivety is the most toxic poison. Ray asks for a hug, but Dorothy just walks away and ignores his request. Poor Ray. I just want to protect him, even though Dorothy is so cruel to him. An investiture is a ceremony where the Emperor formally announces the official successor to the people and is considered one of the Empire's most important affairs. Looking at the scepter, there is supposed to be a spirit stone, but it's now missing. There was news that it was found right before she was executed, but it doesn't matter now. And thus, the investiture is undertaken on this very day. Ray glances at her and gives her his warmest smile. Also, the spirits are flowing in her direction, which makes her even more annoyed. I'm sure Ray just loves you, Dorothy. No need to be ashamed of that. When Carnan crowns his son, Dorothy just hopes that the next sovereign is a good and wise king for the history of books. After that, people start greeting Carnan and Ray, but Dorothy just stands behind them. Their name is like a curse to her because whenever those people admire how she looks just like her mom, Carnan will just tell them that they are spouting nonsense. Ugh, this guy. How can you be so cruel? Dorothy has no choice but to bear with this blatant rejection with no escape, being ignored and treated like a candlestick on the wall. If it were just the old her, she would have been causing trouble for Ray, but that was then. She just wants this to be over, hoping that Ray will understand that it's not a place for her to be in. Suddenly, Theon approaches her with a glass of wine in hand. Dorothy is surprised to see Theon approaching and talking to her, but Theon notices that she hasn't touched any food or drink, so he brings her a glass of pomegranate juice. Well, of course our little princess is kind of delusional, thinking that he must have been watching her all this time. And now she's thinking of savoring every sip. Little princess, let's not assume unless stated. We're on your side here, and we definitely don't want you to get hurt. Theon starts talking about how smart she is based on what Ray has told him, and so he looks forward to seeing her at Episteme soon. Episteme is the Empire's most prestigious academy, producing the finest minds in this land and the hub of all social connections among the nobility's youth, advantageously forged for future relations. However, unlike Ray, who was able to easily enroll, she was not given that privilege because she must not overshadow the crown prince in any way. In rebellion against this injustice, she snuck out of the palace and hurled a stone at Episteme, which hit the eldest son of Duke Bronte in the head. It was the final straw in her relationship with Carnan. She doesn't want to repeat that because she already let go of her selfish desires. Theon is quick-witted, so he picks up on the situation just by looking at Ray's position and hers. Dorothy is anxious about Theon seeing this side of hers, so she tries to change the subject, but then Julia comes, telling him that the Grand Duke is asking for his presence. Dorothy is alone again, so she decides to retire to her room when suddenly, someone jabs her drink, causing it to splash all over her dress. But she is even more worried about the juice that Theon gave her. However, Carnan tells her to apologize. Ray objects, saying that she's the victim, but Dorothy bows her head and apologizes to Duke Bronte, a far superior presence in this court than a mere princess with only the facade of power. Gosh, their father really infuriates me. His senseless actions are unacceptable. For Dorothy, it isn't hard to apologize. This kind of treatment is nothing, really. Even better, an acceptable reason to be excused. However, when she looks around, she sees Theon looking at her. She feels nauseous and can't bear their pitiful glances at the pathetic sight of a powerless princess on display. Deep inside, she is begging them to look away, especially him. It's funny how a mere glass of juice can fill one's rosy desires for a moment and suddenly upend her evening soon after, revealing her hidden vulnerabilities. She is used to how Carnan treats her that way, but she can't simply handle that look in Theon's eyes. Even knowing for a fact that he has no feelings for her, she is still jealous of seeing him with Julia. She knows that she must let him go. God, that's heartbreaking. Suddenly, Ray knocks on her door, asking if she wants to talk about it. However, Dorothy just shoves him away. Ray even proposes to have a little party of their own, but Dorothy's upsetting mood is displaced to him. She opens the door and grabs his attire, angrily reminding him to act like a crown prince and emphasizing that she doesn't need his pity. Poor Ray. He just wants to comfort her and make sure that she won't feel out of place. Then, she begs him to leave her alone, crying out in anger. However, she stops when she hears Theon's voice, asking if she's all right. He's right there all along. Oh no, you promised to be good, Dorothy. You betrayed us. It turns out that Ray has brought them, so they could all play together. Dorothy suddenly slams the door shut, embarrassed of what she did to her brother. In her room, she now despises herself for being so pitiful and unlovable. What will he think of her now? She promises to be good. No, better than everyone else. That's her resolution of repentance in this life, but what will happen from now on? For days, she is bedridden, but all this time, she keeps saying to be good. When she finally recovers, she notices Ray's presence peeking in the door. He flinches when she calls out his name and nervously goes into the room, bringing his first crop of tomatoes as a present. Turns out that he made a secret vegetable garden behind the castle. But Dorothy doesn't seem to appreciate her brother's efforts and starts to point out how he should be busy studying instead of growing some vegetables in his little garden. In his defense, he studies from time to time. In her mind, Ray is so unaware that some people are vying to surpass him. Unlike her, he already has the world in his hands without any effort, and while enjoying all the time he has, he's still managed to become the crown prince. We're not trying to invalidate Dorothy's feelings, but Ray deserves to be happy in whatever he does, too, as a child. After all, we really don't know the pressure that he's been carrying all this time, constantly hiding it from his sister so he can cheer her up. But even so, Ray apologizes for always bothering her, but Dorothy tells him that he won't be a good emperor that way. Despite her resolution to be good, there's a part of her that doesn't want him on that throne. Perhaps it's her irrefutable nature as a tyrant. But still, Ray assures her that he will do his best at Epitheme to become a brother she's proud of. But really, she just wants you to focus on taking care of yourself, Ray. She just can be cruel always. Sometimes. Then, Ray hesitantly asks if she wants to go outside. Dorothy has seen it all already in her past life, so she isn't really interested in taking tours. Ray is tearful at her rejection of his ideas, but after days of persisting, she finally agrees to, but on one condition. She will go alone with the governess to escort her. Ray whimpers, but what matters is that she's going outside. Dorothy, on the other hand, is annoyed at his face, as usual. That morning, the governess gives her an outdoor dress to wear, happily squeezing Dorothy's hand, and hurriedly heads out before she changes her mind. In town, the governess offers her hand to hold Dorothy so she won't get lost. In her previous life, she has never walked this place while holding someone's hand. Poor Dorothy. If your mom was alive, I'm sure she would take you to places and hold your hand. When she sees the entire empire, she is kind of happy about it, realizing how it looks without a tyrant. Oops, you forgot your father, princess. Only he's a tyrant to you. The empire she remembers was full of worn-torn cities, emaciated people, and blood-soaked streets. She thinks that perhaps it wouldn't hurt to briefly partake in this peaceful scenery. However, danger awaits down the alley. Dorothy is lying on the floor. Her eyes are blindfolded while her body is tied with a rope. All she can hear are the voices of men planning to get rid of her the moment money is laid in their hands. She clenches her teeth out of anger. She can't believe that it's happening to her. If this situation happened in her past life, those men would be in great trouble right now. 4 days ago, the governess kept on taking her from store to store to try out different things, and she looked so done with the situation that she was in. Dorothy instantly regrets going out. While they were walking, the governess told her that they would stop by a bookstore in the alleyway to get some books for her. This immediately earned her attention, her face eventually gleaming. She really does know how to lift up Dorothy's mood. They are talking about getting a dessert as they're walking towards the bookstore when all of a sudden, someone attacks the governess from behind, causing her to collapse on the floor. The man grabs Dorothy and presses a handkerchief on her face, causing her to lose consciousness. Present. Dorothy is incredulous that she used to be the empress of an empire, but at that very moment, she looks helpless. In her mind, she doesn't mind dying a little too soon, but she certainly doesn't want to be killed by those thugs. It's been 4 days since those thugs sent the governess to come back with money, but no one came. Dorothy passed out for 4 days too, leading her body to feel weak and parched. These men are cruel. How could they do that to a child? She feels that Carnan will only abandon her, even though the governess does her best. She is left with no choice but to take this matter into her own hands. That's right, Dorothy. You couldn't really expect something from your useless father. She sits and asks them to take off the blindfold and ropes. The moment she opens her eyes, a man with a scar on his forehead greets her with a smile on his face. Right there, the act starts. She pretends to be a powerless little girl. With an innocent look on her face, Dorothy asks the man what his name is, and he answers that he is Tutu. She asks him if he is her new governess, but he politely declines, saying that he isn't. With an adorable expression trying to show her charm, she asks him if he is her father's friend, to which he answers yes. She's so cute with those expressions. However, behind those expressions are her bloody thoughts of ripping them apart. She continues to act like an innocent child and goes along with Tutu until she tells him that she is hungry. He feels sorry for her and asks the other guy named Danny if they can give her some food. But Danny doesn't like it. He threatens her with a knife, telling her that they are not her uncles and that they have brought her here to kill her. Tutu is bearable, but Danny's been getting on my nerves. Danny ties her up with a rope once again. All of a sudden, a scorpion appears out of nowhere, which makes both men shriek. Dorothy cleverly offers to catch the scorpion in exchange for untying her. Having no choice, they untie her and Dorothy begins to catch the scorpion. Danny wants her to kill it, but she makes an excuse that she can't since she is too weak to even move her hands. In the end, they end up offering her food, so Dorothy goes out to free the scorpion. The moment she goes out, shock fills her system since the only thing that her eyes can see is sand. They are in a desert. They are in the middle of nowhere, which means that running away isn't an option. Poor Dorothy. What will she do now? Dorothy is still a bit glad that both men kept their promise to let her eat. As she's eating, she hears from both men that it has been spread around the empire that the princess is kidnapped. They know that they have to get rid of her now since they won't be spared the moment they discover who kidnapped the princess. Hearing all of this leaves Dorothy no choice but to wield a knife. Danny suddenly barges in. She swiftly moves and slashes his back with a knife. The blade barely cuts him. He turns around and clutches her neck as he slams her on the wall. Dorothy tries to fight back and slash him with the knife, but she is too weak. How can you do that to a child? As she is fighting for her life, all the resentment begins to form because there is nothing she can do. Just like Ray being the crown prince, her not being enrolled in Epistatheme, not getting Carnan's attention, and not getting the heart of the love of her life, Theon. Lastly, there's nothing she can do to prevent her trusted servant from abandoning her. She gathers all of her resentment, making her fume with anger, which gives her the strength to fight back again and kicks Danny, causing him to land on the floor and stab him with a knife on the knee. He is shrieking with pain as he looks at her pleading to show mercy with those eyes. Those eyes that Dorothy knows well from her past, seeing her as a monster. But why is she the monster when all she wants is to save herself? That's how unfair the world is. You are seen as bad the moment you stand up for yourself. But she vows to be good, so she turns away from him, harming him no longer. She steps outside and she begins her journey on her way home with a heavy heart, having no shoulder to lean on. The night comes and the wind gets stronger and colder, without a light in sight. She feels powerless. Would things be more different if she could wield the spirit of light? Better yet, if she's Ray, will anyone come to her rescue? She gives up and is ready for her death, a lone death, flickering out like a dying ember. It is far better than she could ever ask for. Just when she accepts her death and is ready to close her eyes, a light and the sound of horse hooves is coming her way. Finally, a reason for you to live! This makes her realize that the gods are cruel indeed. Just when she accepts her ending, they give her a reason to hope and a shameless desire to live. Her legs wobble trying to stand up as she raises her hands calling out for help, but her body can't take it, so she collapses on the ground. However, her efforts weren't wasted. The Empire's search party has found her. Dorothy wakes up from her deep sleep, and the moment she opens her eyes, she is greeted by a familiar room, and that's when she realizes that she's back. As she's analyzing the situation, she hears a familiar voice. It's Karnan's. He's talking about her situation and the people who kidnapped her. She swiftly gets out of bed and walks towards the door. She feels hopeful that Karnan went there to check on her and that he somehow cared about her. However, that overflowing hope vanishes the moment she hears her father treat her situation as a pesky nuisance. Karnan orders the governess to take care of the situation and to make sure that there's no more hassle. He's determined to bury the situation and even go to lengths of punishing the people who escalate what happened as if his daughter's life wasn't put at risk. He's really proven himself as a worthless father. The most horrible father award goes to Karnan without a doubt. Realizing how unloved she is by her own father, Dorothy's heart shatters. Despite how brave and strong she is, the pain that she feels due to her father's treatment of her can't be denied. Karnan is a jerk, a perfect example of a worthless father. Can he give a bit of sympathy because of what his daughter experienced? Her entire life, Dorothy thinks that her father dislikes her because of her selfishness, but she has done nothing to provoke him. This makes her realize that maybe he simply doesn't like her. Perhaps the situation that she is in is her punishment for the sins that she had done in her previous life. Her punishment for being a tyrant. The next day, the servants check on her. She immediately knows that the governess is replaced. She wonders if her previous governess is doing fine. She feels sorry. The governess is so kind and sweet towards her. Considering her situation, the guy servant recommends she take a rest at the seaside since it is quiet and full of fresh air. The seaside. This means that she can leave the palace away from everyone else. It is perfect for her since she will be away from prying eyes and can finally hone her strength in peace. Her fists clenched. Despite wanting to hone her strength, the mistakes she made in the past are still haunting her. But that's all it is. It's in the past. Perhaps this time she could put that strength into good use. She tells the new governess that she wants to go there, but she tries to stop her since the castle by the seaside is too huge for her. In the middle of a discussion, with a huge smile on his face, Ray enters the room holding a bouquet. It feels like his jolly presence instantly lights up the room. He's such a sunshine. Ray has been visiting her ever since she arrived. When he knew that she was planning to go to the seaside to recuperate, he was disappointed. He doesn't want to be away from her. He begs her to stay and even offers her to go to the Epistatheme with him. In the end, no matter how much he begs her, she's already firm in her position. Dorothy explains that what happened to her is not his fault, so he isn't obliged to visit her. This makes him whine, but he can do nothing about it. In the end, Dorothy asks him to leave since she wants to rest. Ray is such a sweet brother. He genuinely cares for her and is still kind towards her despite her attitude. I want a brother like him. A few days later, it's the day of her departure. While walking towards the carriage, Dorothy thinks that it's a good thing she told Ray not to send her off because she knew she'd be getting a headache because of him. For sure, he will whine the entire time and beg her to stay. Ray will most likely do it. He's such a cutie. Before she can even step into the carriage, someone stops her. It is Theon. She's in shock since she isn't expecting him to come. Most importantly, she doesn't want him to see her in that situation. Theon is glad he made it on time. He purposely went there to give her something. It's candies. He thought that she may experience motion sickness on her journey. Dorothy's cheeks redden the moment she sees the candies. He's so genuine. He genuinely thought of her and even pulled off some efforts to see her off, just to give those candies. That is so sweet. With eyes full of worries and slightly reddened cheeks, Theon avoids her gaze as he tells her that it's a real shame that he won't be able to see her for a while due to her sudden departure. Suddenly, he faces Dorothy with a smile on his face, while hoping for her swift recovery as he also hopes for her to return soon. With thoughts mixing up in her head, Dorothy bids him farewell and turns to ride in the carriage. Theon is so cute. His actions clearly show that he somehow has feelings for Dorothy. He never cared for her in her former life. Deep inside, she's hoping for something between them, but she refuses to entertain such thoughts. In the carriage, she tries to calm herself down, but still, she can't deny the fact that Theon cares for her. It's the first time, and that brings her joy. Suddenly, she pulls out the candies he gave her and presses them into her heart. Her face is brightly red and is full of peace and happiness at that moment. This is my first time seeing her so happy. May it continue. The moment she arrives at the castle by the seaside, she's immediately in love with the place. The peaceful place makes her realize that being away from the palace makes her feel like there's a huge weight off her chest. away from the place where she killed Ray and where Theon died. The palace suffocates her. It's filled with bad memories. The memories of her tyranny. For her, being in a new place is for the best. She can finally start anew here. It must have felt like a breath of fresh air. All of a sudden, someone knocks. It's the castle maid named Clara. Her face is full of worry as she tells Dorothy to wait for her since she'll be devastated if she gets lost. Suddenly, Clara introduces a tall guy to her. It's Sir Stefan Greenwall, the knight who will be guarding her. Not gonna lie, Stefan looks so fine. The moment her eyes lay on him, the memories from the past resurfaced, including the way she killed the person in front of her at this very moment. She can't help but question why he is with her. Why is he guarding a powerless princess? Dorothy stretches her hand as a sign that she's pleased to be his acquaintance. But then, seconds later, he only gave her a high five instead of a handshake. How adorable is this guy? In the study room, Dorothy is planning to write guides on how to be good when suddenly Clara comes in to give her some snacks. Having a hard time on what to write, she asks Clara for some help. Out of nowhere, Stefan also appeared. Clara can't help but chuckle at how adorable Dorothy looks for wanting to write those notes. Clara suggested different things, but it doesn't really please Dorothy. Clara also suggests at least laughing 10 times a day, since for her, laughter is the best medicine. Dorothy gives it a try by trying to smile. She really looks adorable when she's doing it. However, she stops it since forcing a smile only makes her face twitch. It's not like she doesn't want to be happy. It's just that she has no reason to be. She starts to scribble around and writes in her notebook. To be good, she has to do these things. First, smile kindly once a day. Second, do not covet what belongs to another. Third, save 1,000,000 people, and so on. Reading this makes her reminisce about the mistakes that she's made. She had to change. The moment she finishes with it, she asks Stefan to go to the beach with her. As she's enjoying her time, she notices a boy sitting by the beach. He's familiar. She knows that boy clearly. It's Ethan Bronte, the most beautiful yet the most dangerous man she knows. Ethan Bronte, also known as Gold-Eyed Angel. He's everyone's fantasy, may it be men or women. There's no one who dreams of opposing him, and he only has his eyes for Dorothy. He was her right hand. He helped her to kill Ray and unalive Julia. He killed those people Dorothy hated on her behalf. Given how Ethan betrayed her in the past, Dorothy plans on staying away from him in this life. However, she immediately clenches her fist the moment she sees him cry. She has never seen Ethan cry like that, as if he's a completely different person. She immediately reaches him, but he looks surprised. He turns around and runs away. Dorothy wonders why he's crying alone, but then she remembers Ethan's background. He's the son of Duke Bronte, who was born out of wedlock. Ethan Bronte isn't allowed to enroll in Epistetheme and isn't allowed to appear at social events until he becomes an adult. He's hidden all his life by his very own family for being the bastard son. What a painful life to live. As soon as the news about the princess is down the coast, dozens of invitations are sent. She thought that it would only be a simple gathering, but then the moment she meets up with those ladies, she feels like she's surrounded by dozens of Ray. They treat her as a child and even want to feed her. She instantly wants to regret coming there. Out of nowhere, an elegant lady calls her and invites her over to their house. That woman is Duchess Bronte. She invited Dorothy over. Accepting the invitation means that she'll be able to see Ethan, but then that will also be a chance for her to help him not to side with darkness. Might as well add it to her list of how to be good. At the Bronte's mansion, Dorothy, together with Duke and Duchess Bronte, are eating in the dining hall when all of a sudden, Dorothy opens up about their son. Duke Bronte tells her that their son Jonathan is in Epistetheme at the moment, but then they are left in shock when she says that it's about their other son whom she is talking about and that she wants to meet him. The moment Dorothy tells them that she wants to meet Ethan, Duke and Duchess Bronte start to whisper to each other. Smiles start to form on their faces. They must have thought that Dorothy likes Ethan. After the meal, a servant accompanies her to the garden to see Ethan. When the servant leaves, they start to talk a bit when all of a sudden, Dorothy stares at him, which makes Ethan conscious, and asks her if there's something on his face. She answers that handsomeness was on his face, which turns Ethan red, looking like a tomato. Dorothy? I think every person will eventually feel conscious like Ethan if you stare too much. Looking at his reaction, Dorothy wonders why he isn't well aware that he is handsome. The Ethan that she knows in her former life is more brazen. She doesn't know that he's so different as a child. Looking down with his hands covering his mouth while his cheeks are still red as a tomato, Ethan suddenly tells her that she is the most beautiful person he ever met in his life. Hearing it from him confirms that he's still the Ethan that she knows, the silver-tongued serpent who can coax anyone with sugar-coated words. While talking with Ethan, Dorothy learns that he has no friends, and his brother doesn't want him to go outside that much. Also, nothing good ever happens when he goes outside. That's why he's so glad that Dorothy is visiting him. She then asks him to come over to Anasta's castle sometime. She thinks that they will be friends. Maybe Ethan can live a different life too. Out of happiness, Ethan goes to her and kisses her on the cheeks, which surprises her a lot. Despite what Ethan shows to her, she still thinks that there's still a chance that he might not be genuine, so she still has to be careful. He kissed her! OMG! That was so sudden, but I like Ethan with her more. I'm sorry, Theon. At the castle, Clara is busy planning what to do on Dorothy's birthday together with Stefan. She's planning to go for a surprise, but Stefan doesn't think it's the right way to go. Dorothy doesn't look like the girl who would enjoy surprises. On the day of her birthday, Clara prepares a lot of delicious food and excitedly greets Dorothy. Shortly after, Clara begs her to go outside since the weather is nice. Not even gloomy weather can stop her from her plan. Dorothy knows very well that her words are scripted, but she still picks that seashell that Clara points out. For a moment, she's thinking that maybe there's a present under it, but as she looks around, Clara is no longer there. Suddenly, a man in a lion's suit is approaching her. Our Dorothy is very smart to guess that it's Stefan, even dumbstruck at his lifeless roar. Even so, to do this for her, Stefan is so adorable. In her mind, she wants to stop him, but she remembers how she used the cover of Mighty Lion Leo to hide the actual book she was reading. With a cringe expression, she still goes with the flow, considering it as her good deed for the day. Stefan roars again, and now she's thinking that maybe she should just forget being good. But he's just doing his job, so she gives him the shells that she picked a while ago, telling him to put it in his pocket. Why does a lion have a pocket? He's not a kangaroo. She then remembers how Clara sews pockets on almost everything. Suddenly, she asks if the lion's here because of her birthday. Stefan kneels on one knee and taps her shoulder, greeting her a happy birthday and another roar. For her, it's a little embarrassing, but she lets out a smile and expresses her gratitude. For the first time, she knows how it feels to have someone go the extra mile for her. I feel so sad that she's only now feeling these things when she should have been cherished from the start. Stefan then reaches out and lifts her up. She never thought she'd be in the arms of a loyal knight to Ray. In her past life, she scoffed at Stefan's loyalty to death, belittling the socially inept knight who came from humble beginnings as a mercenary. Only now, she begins to see him in a new light, a ceaseless, diligent, and persevere knight who overcomes all obstacles, including his roots. Unlike her, who took the crooked path at every turn, he walked straight to his goals. She absent-mindedly says out that he has always been a courageous and extraordinary person, but Stefan corrects her that he is a lion, not a person, which makes Dorothy genuinely laugh for the first time. Aw, she really looks cute whenever she smiles more. We want to see more of it, Dorothy. When the rain starts pouring, Stefan runs to the castle, but he refuses to come in just to keep her fantasy alive. Stefan doesn't say much, but he is the sweetest thing. Shortly after, Dorothy receives a letter from Ray, but she's not interested to open it. When Stefan comes in, Clara whispers something that makes him proud and happy. Dorothy knows that they both completely think that she fell for it. Can we take a moment and appreciate how well-built and hot Stefan is? Not to mention, he has a pretty face, too. And so, she just plays along, telling him that she encountered the mighty lion on the beach earlier. However, his proud expression fades in just a blink of an eye when she asks for her present. Clara moves away, leaving him all sweaty to think of anything to say. Suddenly, Dorothy exclaims that she wants to learn swordsmanship to protect herself from harm. She's been staying away from swords in fear that it will end up in tragedy and more greed. But this day, she realizes that good people also need to be strong and that the sword doesn't determine the good and evil of a person. A few months later, Dorothy starts learning swordsmanship, but she's quite frustrated that Stefan doesn't let her use a real sword. Suddenly, she feels someone's presence behind her, so she swings her wooden sword, only to find Ethan. She realizes that she had never seen Ethan wield a sword in the past, but he had countless numbers of supporters who gladly drew their swords on his behalf. Suddenly, Ethan wipes off the sweat on her face, but realizing how awkward it is, she withdraws and wipes herself instead. Then, Ethan grabs her hand, hoping that she can show him around since he gave her a tour of their manor last time. She notices that her hand is clammy from training, so she asks to take a bath first. Naughty Ethan then suggests that perhaps they can start their tour in the bathroom. Behave, boy! You're still a spring chicken. Dorothy feels a chill going down her spine, so she quickly turns around. She should have known not to let her guard down around Ethan. But what were you thinking, Dorothy? Ethan is still a baby. He wasn't actually implying anything. Shortly after, Dorothy shows him her bedchamber first. It's rather empty than the lavishly extravagant room in her past life. She got rid of the expensive yet mindless trinkets since she realized that luxurious things are meaningless. Suddenly, Ethan brings out a very valuable jewelry as a present for her, thinking that it can make her happy, but she refuses to accept it. After all, they've only just met, and this kind of trinket should only be given to someone very special to him. Ethan indeed sees her as someone very special, but he just got carried away to have someone visit him for the first time. He then apologizes for being a burden to her. Dorothy is well aware that he has a special talent in burdening others. Suddenly, Ethan notices a letter from the royal palace. Dorothy tells him that it's nothing important, thinking that it only contains a lot of whining from her brother. If only she was granted the same privilege, she would never throw away such an opportunity at Epitheme. But I feel sorry for Ray. He is just acting like a kid who loves his sister very much. I hope you see this too, Dorothy. Before they leave the room, Ethan points something out on the drawer, which doesn't look like it's coming from the royal palace. She then shoves it inside the drawer, telling him that it's a gift and that he should not mind it. Ethan then proposes to give her a handkerchief next time. Ethan takes one last look at it, with a dark expression on his face. Oh no, this child is something. A dangerous one. I still can't figure out his intentions, but then again, he's a kid. At dinner, everyone's all gloomy. It turns out there's a deadly disease spreading around and it has killed many people. Although it's curable, the cost of medicine is too expensive for most people. Dorothy doesn't want to return to the royal palace yet. Also, she realizes that this is the perfect opportunity to be good. After 2 weeks, the epidemic starts to die down and the villages that were impacted by the epidemic return to vibrancy. All thanks to Dorothy's wealth and position. However, she's still doubting herself if it's truly a good deed to use excess wealth. Of course it is. You helped a lot of people, Dorothy. Suddenly, a servant comes in with a bag of potatoes, saying that someone left it as a way of thanking her for ending the epidemic. Ethan smiles and tells her that everyone who has experienced her kindness will remember her as a truly good person. Looking at the potatoes, she realizes that this is the first time to see someone express their gratitude because of her good deed. Way to go, Dorothy! 3 years later, Dorothy is still under Stefan's training in swordsmanship. However, she's so frustrated that she can't knock him off his arrogant stance, let alone beat him. Suddenly, she finds an opening when Clara distracts them. However, Stefan just stops her attack with his bare hand. Whew! Quite a long way to go, Dorothy. Meanwhile, in Epitheme, Ray is sad because Dorothy hasn't written back in 3 years. Theon pats his shoulder and tells him not to worry, but he himself knows that when they parted, he didn't expect them to be far apart for too long. And so, he advises Ray to take a short leave during vacation in order to see her. Ray's mood suddenly brightens as he happily exits. Poor Ray really has the purest of intentions, but I have a feeling Dorothy will not appreciate his presence. When Dorothy's in the bath, Clara informs her that it has been 3 years since the end of the epidemic, but the people still continue expressing gratitude with vegetables. Dorothy then remembers that she saw a boy who delivered the vegetables. She wanted to invite him for dinner, but he always made a run for it. Shortly after, Dorothy receives another letter from Ray again, but she notices that the other one is meant for Stefan. When asked what it says, Stefan replies that it's about the Order's promotion examination, an opportunity for him to rise to a higher rank in knighthood. Clara is happy for him, but Dorothy seems saddened at the thought of him leaving. When she reads it herself, she finds out that the examination date is fast approaching, so he has to leave this week. Also, the postscript says that there's no plans for a replacement, which means Dorothy will no longer be provided with a guarding knight for her safety and protection. Seriously, Karnan is out of his mind. I am so close to breaking into the palace and dragging him out to the sea. As Clara takes her leave, Dorothy expresses her feelings for him in taking this opportunity, believing that he will surely pass the exam. And so she wants to give him a proper send-off, even if their time together is quite short, but they've grown closer to one another. So as her last request, she asks him to stay for another day. Stefan kneels on one knee and holds her hand, assuring her that he belongs to her as a guard knight whose utmost mission and duty is to keep her safe. Realizing that she's been surrounded by fools who insist on giving up gains and choosing losses, Stefan smiles and tells her that he's only following his heart. In her past life, he was a man who made foolish choices with honesty. And just with that, she jumps to hug him. Deep inside, she doesn't mind being called selfish. Instead, she is rather grateful to him for choosing Dorothea Millionaire. Aww, Stefan really looks like an older brother to her. But I hope she'll learn to appreciate Ray too. In town, Stefan accompanies Dorothy to help people in need, but they stumble upon a signage that says there's an amateur swordsmanship competition. Stefan takes a glance at her as she eagerly convinces him to register. At the registration area, the person in charge belittles Dorothy's capabilities just because she's a child. Dorothy argues in return until she can't stand it anymore. Suddenly, Stefan pulls out his sword and pierces through the table, ordering him to follow the rules. The person trembles in fear and hands out their registration. As they are about to head back, they hear a noise coming from someone. It turns out that Jonathan, Ethan's brother, publicly scolds him for not doing things right. He suddenly slaps him for ruining the gift that was intended for their mother. The audacity of this creature! How could a person be so cruel? And to his brother at that? As Ethan picks up the broken pieces, he flinches as he gets hurt. Jonathan still wants to slap him again when suddenly, Dorothy stops him and helps Ethan to stand. If Dorothy was still a tyrant, he would have been dead by now. Shortly after, Dorothy grabs his arm and asks if this situation happens often. Clearly, it does, so Ethan asks her if he can stay with her until Jonathan calms down a little. Dorothy can't help but to notice that he surely has a pretty face. When they get back to the castle, Ray is there to welcome Dorothy back home. Also, Theon is around. Dorothy can't believe that Theon joins Ray to visit him, so she drags her brother to a room and slams the door, asking why he brought Theon with him. The reason why she left the royal palace was to forget it all to live a new life. Theon's presence in the castle only means a torment on her part, defeating the purpose of her departure. Ray explains that he thought that they could play together in the castle, but Dorothy cuts him off, saying that he didn't consider her feelings or even asking her permission. Ray looks down and stutters to say more, but Dorothy snaps out, emphasizing that their surprise visit is a disaster. She then orders him to leave immediately, although he is hurt and crying that his hopes are crushed the moment they meet after 3 years. I feel really bad for Ray. What did he do to deserve this? Get your act together, Dorothy. She can't stand being the villain in the situation, so she decides to leave the room, but she comes across with Theon, who clearly sees that she doesn't look well. She then runs away from him. She only wants him to see the best of her. Why is it so hard? Although she's no longer a tyrant, she still acts bad towards the people who are good to her. Dorothy starts to question how he suddenly grabs her hand now when she waited a lifetime for him to extend his hand to her. She wants to look back, but she can't bring herself to do that. She doesn't deserve to look at him. Theon speaks up for visiting her all of a sudden without telling her in advance. He understands that she's upset by his presence when he's not even part of the royal family. He just simply wants to see her again. After seeing her off 3 years ago, he has been worried about her, so he told Ray to come along as well. And so, he asks if she's uncomfortable with his presence. Dorothy answers that she's not, but he still notices that she'd always make that gloomy look on her face whenever she sees him. And so, he kneels down, still not letting go of her hand, hoping that they can get along well. The thought of them getting along well sends a throbbing ache in her heart. She remembers how she begged him not to leave her, and all she ever wanted was for them to get along well together. Gosh, the pain that she must have felt about not being loved back. She must have said those exact words to him hundreds of times, and now he's repeating those back to her? Suddenly, Ethan approaches them and asks for medicine. This gives her an opportunity to excuse herself from Theon. Before they leave, Ethan takes a glance at Theon as he stares back at them. In the room, Dorothy realizes how foolish she is for running away when all Theon asked for was to get along well. As Ethan moves closer to her, saying that it's her that needs the medicine, since she looks worse off than him. He then leans closer to her and boldly confesses that he likes her. Dorothy's shocked for a moment, but she realizes that he's lying again and tells him to stop it because it's not funny. And so, she tosses him outside the room. Outside the room, Ethan thinks that her reactions are strange. When he spots Theon, he confidently approaches and introduces himself. He even lies about how Dorothy applies the medicine herself. Theon is quite speechless of it, thinking about something. After introducing himself, he reaches out to the doorknob, but Ethan stops him, saying that Dorothy wants to get some rest. Theon can't help but to ask if he's close with her. He then answers that they're close enough to see each other at least once a week, implying how unlucky Theon's situation is. This kid? I'm starting to hate him. Ugh. They stare at each other for a while, unable to blink or gaze away even for a second. If stares can kill, I wonder who's down by now. However, Ethan smirks and bows to excuse himself. In the room, Dorothy keeps self-sabotaging her progress. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door with a wordless response. She thinks that it's Theon, but as she opens the door, she sees Stefan standing in front of her. It's cute how he responds with a nod or a shake of his head whenever someone asks him questions. Also, it's cute how Dorothy understands him as if she knows him by heart. Dorothy pats on the couch, telling him to sit. A deafening silence envelops the room for a moment. Then, she asks if he can lend his ears for a second, to which he agrees. She then tells him about a terrible nightmare where the person she loved didn't like her. He hated her so much that he ended up hanging himself in her room. All this time, she's been thinking that maybe she's just a bad person from the beginning, since she was born by killing her mother. She didn't really kill her mother, but the thought of Alice dying after giving birth to Dorothy still leaves a big impact on her growing up. And so she thinks that maybe she can't be loved and that she's destined to be a bad person no matter what she does. It scares her sometimes that there may only be evil in the roots of the Empire's princess and that she's been evil since birth. Out of the blue, Stefan pulls her closer and hugs her tightly as he pats her back, telling her that she's a good child. In her mind, she thanks him from the bottom of her heart and deeply regrets killing him in her past life. In this life, she really wants to be good. Meanwhile, while Clara looks for Dorothy, she stumbles upon Ray, who's sitting on the floor bawling his eyes out. Ray looks down, thinking that Dorothy hates him a lot. He was just worried about her being alone all these years. Is it so strange for a brother to act like that? He's been waiting for this day way before even the vacation started, and now everything's not going well. Perhaps he's just a fool in Dorothy's eyes. I feel really bad for him. But still, he doesn't give up on proving himself to her. As much as I want to validate Dorothy's feelings, her treatment towards him is really bad. Clara disagrees that he's a fool since he's enrolled in the most prestigious institution in the whole Empire. Ray confesses that he even placed 80th in the last exams out of 100 students. He only wishes that she likes him, but he doesn't know what to do. And so, he considers doing what Dorothy likes in hopes that she'll like him. Clara then points out that Dorothy likes swordsmanship and that there's a competition coming up in a few days. He thinks that if he wins that competition, Dorothy will definitely see his worth. Little Ray is kind of delusional, isn't he? Just kidding. We will definitely support him. And so, it's decided. When Theon reconnects with Ray, he blames himself for coming along, thinking that she's in a bad mood because of his presence. He emphasizes that he's not a royal family member and not even close to her. Suddenly, he sees the handkerchief that he offered when she cried the first time they met. He was sure she had thrown it away. Later that night, Dorothy comes out on the balcony, unable to fall asleep because she knows that Theon is close by. Holding the handkerchief in hand, she thinks that perhaps she should return it. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!